Hey everybody, Tyler's back here, and I'm joined this time with Bridger Snow, and we're here to bring you a guide on building EV spreads. How's it going, Bridger?
Hey guys, this is me, Bridger. I sometimes go by Squirtu. I've been playing for a few years. It's a good time.
Sweet, yeah. And Bridger's been a good friend of mine for a couple of years now, and I met him through Pokemon, and we always kind of just hang out when we play in tournaments, and this is also another very solid player. So in this guide, we're going to explain how to effectively build EV spreads for your Pokemon. And we're not gonna like talk about how to put them on your Pokemon in game. There's plenty of guides on to do that, but we want to talk more on like building good EV spreads, things like that. So just keep that in mind. Like if you don't know how to put EVs on your Pokemon, we'll show you how. Well, we're not going to show you how, but we'll show you resources to do that. So, and then on a side note, this isn't only geared towards VGC, but all formats as well. We're just using VGC examples and like mainly talking about that because that's what we have the most experience with. But this can be applied to like any other format in Pokemon.
Yeah. And the biggest difference with the VGC stuff is that all of our Pokemon are going to be level 50, so all of our EV spreads we're doing are going to be for level 50 Pokemon. A lot of things on Smogon and whatnot will be level 100, so make sure you know the difference there.
Alright, and like I said, we're not going to explain how to do EVs in-game and all that, like put them on. So I have here a list of videos and guides on how to do that stuff, like where to EV train, about EVs, and things like that. So all these links will be in the description below, and you can check those out if you need to know actually how to put the EVs on your Pokemon or the most effective ways. So just check those out if you need help. But like I said, once you know how to do that, then you can apply what we're going to teach you here to do that like really well in a competitive sense. So, and that's kind of what we'll just leave it. We'll leave it at that.
Alright, so the first thing we want to do when we're thinking about how we're going to build an EV spread is we're going to decide what is our Pokemon doing? What roles is it going to fill? So a few different examples of those are it could be like a fast sweeper or a bulky pivot or maybe like a trick room setter. And each of these different roles is going to have different tendencies on how they're built. A trick room setter, for example, will probably be almost all of its investment in its bulk, maybe a little bit in offense depending on how you're doing it. Or like a sweeper is going to be basically the exact opposite, all speed, all attack or special attack.
Yeah, and when you're doing this, keep in mind the rest of your team. The role of one Pokemon will usually be dependent on your team's composition. So if you're building a Trick Room team, you won't want all of your Pokemon to be bulky Trick Room setters. You're gonna want to dedicate that role to one or two Pokemon, but then you're gonna need offensive sweepers while Trick Room is active. Because if you just have a bunch of bulky Trick Room Pokemon, you can set up Trick Room, but you're not actually like KOing stuff in Trick Room or taking advantage of Trick Room. So then once you've decided the role of the Pokemon, then you want to determine some goals that allow it to fill that role, super effectively.
So basically the three main goals we're going to have when building an EV spread are not in any particular order. We're going to hit certain speed tiers, survive certain attacks, and guarantee getting our KOs.
Alright, so goal 1 we have here is speed. And so for speed, you first need to decide what you want the Pokemon to outspeed and what speed stat that is. A useful guide for this is linked below, and that's the Trainer Towers speed tier guide for VGC 18. It also will list some Pokemon speed stats after various modifiers as well. And like I said, that's specifically for VGC. And for speed tiers and other formats, you'll have to kind of find that out on your own. But for VGC specifically, that's what this guide is for.
Alright, so there's a lot of different things that you can use to modify your speed or your opponent's speed. These relevant modifiers are going to come down mostly to stat changes, pluses or minuses, things like Dragon Dance or Icy Wind. Then you've got the Choice Scarf, Tailwind, Paralysis, and weather abilities such as Chlorophyll or Swift Swim. And there's a few others, like the swamp caused by pledges or holding an iron ball, but they don't really come up much. Now, these modifiers are usually referred to as speed control, and each of them is independent of the others, which means Tailwind will give you, it doesn't give you +2 speed, it multiplies your speed by 2. So if you have, you've been hit by an Icy Wind and you're in Tailwind, A lot of people think that's the same as being at +1 speed, but it's really not. It's ×2 and then also ×2/3. So it's more of a multiplier of 4/3 or 1.33.
So we are going to use the Zapdos from the first 6 episodes of Training Battles as our working example. I'm choosing Zapdos because it kind of follows the lines of how we're presenting this. It's a tanky Pokemon, and kind of the order I went in building this spread is similar to how we're presenting it. Of course, it's not the only way to do it. Sometimes you just, you can start with offense first or things like that. It just depends on the Pokemon, but Zapdos I feel like is just a really good example, because with Zapdos you kind of want to cover everything, both offense, speed, defense. So I'm just gonna. So that's why I chose this example. I think it's a really good Pokemon to use as it. So when determining the speed on Zapdos, I wanted it to outspeed base 130 speed Pokemon after an Icy Wind. And I chose this because I had Icy Wind on Crest, and I was planning on kind of trying to use Cresselia a lot for, just speed control purposes. So this way, like, Zapdos could come in and outspeed basically almost everything, because Tapu Koko is like the most relevant fast thing. There's some things faster, but so if I ever hit a Icy Wind, I know Zapdos could come in and outspeed that. And then at the same time, I wanted my Zapdos to be 1 point slower than my Landorus. And the reason for that was I wanted to be able to press Earthquake with Landorus and Roost on the same turn if it came down to it. Because the move Roost gets rid of Zapdos' flying type for that turn, or at least the duration of that turn. And that would make it weak to ground type, so I didn't want to be able to have to Roost and then Earthquake my own Zapdos. This way I could safely, barring Trick Room or Landorus having a speed modifier that lowers Zapdos for some reason, I could safely press EQ Roost in a situation that I wanted. And in that, I wanted my Landorus to also outspeed everything after an Icy Wind, so that another reason for it to be 1 point faster. So, and then looking at that, I do the modifier calculation, and I find base 130s hit 200 speed. And so with that, I made sure to do the math, which the most consistent way to do that is to take the speed 200, multiply it by 2, and then divide it by 3. And then when I do that, I go 200 times 2, divide that by 3. It came out to 133.333 and so on. So that tells me I need to be at 134 in order to hit that stat. So I just put in 108 EVs into Zapdos, and then that made it 108 or 134 speed, which is outspeeding Pokemon with a speed stat 200 at -1 stat modifier. And that's how I generated my Zapdos' speed.
So the second goal you'll normally look to when building an EV spread is surviving specific attacks. You want to make sure you survive common attacks from common Pokemon in the metagame. We've included here a link to this survival calculator. It's pretty similar to the one at Trainer Tower, but it's a little better when you're looking at surviving multiple attacks in the same turn. Now, with surviving attacks, it's really important to keep modifiers in mind, just like we were with speed, except just a little different. All of these, just like they were with speed, act independently of each other. So a lot of times people will think that burn is the same as having a -2 attack stat, but it cuts your attack in half. So if you were at +6 attack from, say, Belly Drum, and then you got burned, the common misconception is that you'd be at +3 attack, but you're really more equivalent of +2. It's a ×2 multiplier. But if you're using the Trainer Tower calculator, it's going to account for pretty much all these just included, so I wouldn't worry too much. One thing that is really nice to keep in mind, though, is your HP numbers. So you want to make sure you're taking less damage from things like sand, burn, hail, life orb, if that's applicable, and then getting the most out of your recovery if you're using Amoonguss mostly. One of the most important examples of this, though, is with Belly Drum, and specifically Snorlax, sometimes Azumarill. If your HP isn't divisible by 2, then when you use Belly Drum, you're not going to proc your Berry at half your health, because you'll be 1 above it. But apart from that example, most of these are kind of like iffy. I would really try to make sure you survive attacks and then kind of play with your HP numbers.
Alright, so back to our Zapdos example. What I wanted Zapdos to survive first was 2 Rock Slides from a neutral Adamant Landorus T. Because not only was Zapdos' role to help provide tailwind support to the team, but I wanted to use it to also help beat Landorus. And of course, Landorus doesn't really do much to Zapdos other than Rock Slide. So with that, I wanted to look at the calc, and we see Rock Slide does over half with no investment. So the first thing I did was I went, I put a lot into HP. I think originally I had 252, but eventually I dropped it a couple points. And now we see, and then when I do that, because obviously I wanted general bulk for Zapdos period, so I just put it max HP, and then later I dropped it a couple points for whatever reason. And now we see Rock Slide is a 25% chance to hit KO, so that's really close to what I want. And once I did that, I just kind of kept going with my EVs, where I landed at 36 defense EVs, and that made Rock Slide here a 0.4% chance. Or 1 point less is 5.1, and so that wasn't necessarily guaranteed, but 0.4 is so slim. Like when I see a 0.4% chance, I just take it, because that's, I don't want to, it's not worth it for me to pump in, the extra EVs here just to make it a guaranteed 3-hit KO. And you can see here, if I jumped up the HP, it makes it guaranteed, or when I drop it, it makes it 0.4. And I went as low as I could to keep it 0.4. So, and by dropping those EVs, I could save room for more attack or more speed. And that's kind of why I went with the 0.4, and that's probably why I dropped the HP right there. So I can kind of, just solve my question, what I was thinking there. And then for the special defense, I put 12 EVs in. I just put 12 EVs. I didn't want too much special defense because Zapdos was holding the Misty Seed, and so it's going to get its boost as long as I have my terrain. And that boosted it by 1 stage, which we saw as the 1.5 times multiplier. And one thing to note here is that with an even number of special defense, I actually get an extra point from the boost, because 111 times 1.5 is 166.6, which rounds, it cuts off the decimal. And then, but at 112, 1 times 1.5 is 168. So by upping by 1 point, I'm actually gaining 2 if I have the boost. And so this kind of gave me the general bulk I wanted. I'd be really specially bulky. I had the defense I wanted to take these attacks from Landorus. Now, obviously, there's the flinch chance, but it gives me another turn to try and, not get flinch or get an attack off and things like that. So that's how I did the defensive calcs on Zapdos.
Securing KOs. So this is pretty similar to the survival calcs we were making before, where you're deciding what you want to live, but now, sometimes it'll be more important to say, I want to make sure I secure a certain KO rather than survive one. This is usually your more offensive Pokemon. So I personally, will usually build defensive, and a lot of times I'll end up dumping whatever's left over into this. But if you are looking for that offensive calc, you'll want to start here instead of on those other ones.
Alright, so now I have my speed and I have my defenses set up with what I want, with the speed I want, the survival calc I want, as well as just now all the general bulk I feel like is necessary. So I dump, like we said, a lot of times we'll dump the remaining EVs into like our attack stat, which worked out here well, because remember I said I wanted Zapdos to be responsible for helping the team deal with Landorus, and since I had HP Ice on it, I looked at the calc, and with the remaining 116 EVs and special attack, we see that Zapdos HP Ice has an 81.3% chance, or 13 out of 16 chance, to OHKO 4 HP Landorus T. Though not perfect, it was good enough for me since the other calculations had a higher priority. That was a really important calc. That was really good for me there. And by also dumping, and now it lets Zapdos also just be like a tank. Not only is it going to take hits a lot better, but it's still going to be, dish out pretty good damage with the 176 special attack stat. So now my Zapdos is ready for its role as this tank and to set up Tailwind to support the team. On top of that, Zapdos is able to deal with Landorus a little better, just like I wanted. And dealing with Landorus is great because it's a Pokemon that's really strong against Kangaskhan and Heatran. And with Zapdos plus Feeny and my own Cresselia, I now had three pretty good ways to help deal with Landorus for different situations. And now I get to test out my Zapdos spread. And testing, I'll just say this, note this now. In testing, you'll probably find changes. And one example I can find is I found out after a while I didn't need the speed in Zapdos because I never really brought both Zapdos and Cresselia a lot, so Zapdos couldn't really capitalize off the Tailwind. So one thing I would do is probably lower speed for maybe more bulk, and even the attack stats not the most important thing I found out, because most landers, or like as the meta develops, are now just running Assault Vest. So it feels kind of pointless to have all the attacks. So honestly, after playing with it, the Zapdos could probably just be mostly bulk with some attack, a little bit of speed, and as long as the HPI is 2-hit killing Landorus, it's usually that'd be pretty good. Most AV Lando, unless I really want to make sure I'm OHKOing those 4 HP non-AV ones that are out there. The probably most important thing that I found for the team was that Zapdos' calcs against Tapu Fini, because Fini could be a problem and Zapdos was the best way to deal with it. So just take a note in that the spread wasn't finalized right here and there when I built it. It was ready for testing, and in testing I found I wanted to make changes. So always keep that in mind when you are building your spread, and as you set it up, your goals might change over time. So all right, and that is our Zapdos example, and I hope that provided some helpful, like, I guess, visual for you guys to kind of see the process and not just us talking about it. All right, and the next thing we want to talk about is efficient EV allocation. Now, this section is focused on being efficient in EV spreads. What this means is like making sure, your natures or EVs are being used well. You're not wasting EVs, or potentially wasting EVs. So the first thing this has to do with is a Pokemon's nature. The general rule of thumb is to use a nature that boosts the Pokemon's highest base stat. Now, I say this as a general rule because you won't always or usually do this. For example, really offensive Pokemon, you're usually just going to boost speed with the nature, even though attack or special attack stat may be higher, and even significantly more higher. And if you need a Pokemon to hit a certain stat or calc that requires a boosting nature to hit it, then you'll boost that nature even though it's not the highest base stat. And like commonly Snorlax will boost, especially belly drum sets, will boost their defense even though their defense is really low, but they want to be able to survive as many things as they can on the physical side. So however, if you do not need to boost that particular stat with the nature to achieve your desired goal, then you can sometimes get more overall stat points just by boosting the highest base stat.
Now, along a similar line as boosting your highest stat with your nature, you can often get a lot more bang for your buck by adding EVs to your lower stats. This stems from EVs adding to your stat rather than being a flat multiplier. Normally it's not a super big deal, you can just get away with maximizing HP, then adding to the defensive stats to survive whatever you need. But Pokemon with extreme stat differences are a little bit different. Let's look at Chansey, for example, a really hot topic. If you add 32 points to Chansey's tiny 25 defense stat at level 50, then you've more than doubled it. However, if you add the same 32 points from maxing its EVs to its 125 special defense stat, then you don't get nearly the same effect. And this user, Umbarsk, sorry if I messed that up, I don't know how to say it, but he's over at Smogon made a really cool guide about this, putting it into a lot of detail, and we've got a link for you right here.
And it's an older guide, but I think it's still really valuable. So, and along those lines, these are examples of kind of what Bridger was talking about, or even with natures too, because sometimes boosting the lower stat with a nature obviously will get you more points. In fact, a lot of times Chansey will run like a bold nature or something like that. So some examples here, and these are the more common and competitively relevant examples. So like Kartana in 2017. I know when Kartana started running Z moves, by the time it started, by the time it started doing that, it would put like 132 or 140 EVs into special defense. And what that did, that little change, went it from always getting KO'd from things like Coco's Life Orb Thunderbolt or Lele's Psychic, and both in their respective terrains, and they go to a guaranteed survival. And that's just like how big of a difference that would make, where the little attack EVs you're taking out didn't make that big of a change. It was still getting the KOs it needed because its attack stat was so big.
And its special defense is so teeny.
Right. And then in 2016, Kyogre was kind of a little similar. You wouldn't run a lot of special attack. You want to put more into its defense because it does so much damage with the rain boost already. by letting it survive a lot more things, it could just sit on the field and be an amazing tank in 2016.
Then one thing I really want to touch on is specifically with Pokemon with high HP and low defenses, namely Hariyama and Drifblim. You'll see them occasionally. I see a lot of people will max out their HP stat on these Pokemon, or at least Hariyama, not as much on Drifblim, I think people cut on. But maxing out the HP does very little because this HP is so high. You'll get way more value even if you took all 252 of those EVs and just put them equally into defense and special defense. You'll have the same investment, but you'll survive more things just because that change on the low stat makes so much more impact.
And then on top of that, by allocating more into the lower stat, you save other EVs for another stat like attack or something like that. And I commonly do this with Snorlax, where I don't want to max its HP. I give it a little bit of HP and will like max its defense with the defense boosting nature for belly drum sets, which saves a little bit. It saves a little bit more attack like EVs overall that I can just dump into attack. So even if I like not belly drumming, I can do a little bit more damage, but still hit all the defensive calcs I want. I recommend if you want to understand what we're talking about more, you can take these Pokemon and just go to the calculator and just start messing around with their defensive investment, all that, and you can kind of see the difference just by playing with the calculator. That's a really good way to try and see firsthand and understand what exactly we're talking about if you don't fully understand it. So like I said, just playing around with the calculator is a great way to learn how to do that.
All right, so wrapping up this guide, one thing I want to touch on is that there's really no perfect EV spread. It's just kind of whatever your team needs at that moment. So you can take Scrafty, for instance, something I've used recently, and normally when I use a Scrafty, it's going to be really bulky, and I put a whole ton into its defense to try to survive like Salaman's Double Edge or whatever. But recently I was using it and realized that I was really lacking offense. So on this specific team, instead of putting a bunch into bulk, I just maxed its attack and said, I want to make sure I kill things. And spreads will kind of evolve over time. Like sometimes as a new Pokemon is introduced into the metagame, i.e. Snorlax in 2017, all your spreads are going to change. Like you're going to want to survive that high horsepower from Snorlax.
And then on going along with that, your EV spreads don't need to be complex. Like you don't have to have a little bit in everything and all these crazy sets. Sometimes just simple 252 spreads work, especially on the really offensive Pokemon. And I think a great example and testament to this is our 2015 World Champion Shoma Honami. All his Pokemon except for the Cresselia had 252 spreads. Like the Kangaskhan was just max attack, max speed, and the craziest one was his Thundurus. It was like a timid nature with 252 HP and 252 special defense, which was really bizarre, especially to me. Because usually,
was it really?
Yeah, but in 2015 normally they'd have these more complex spreads. But yeah, his was a bulky support Thundurus that was just max HP, max special defense. So complex spreads are really good, but like Bridger said, they're team dependent. You're gonna do that stuff for like specific things. But a lot of times you can just start off with 252, and if you find out it's working, just leave it that way. And
just kind of stick with it.
Yeah.
So another funny example is not on the complex EV spreads per se, but back in 2013, or maybe it was 2012. Yeah, it was 2012. Zach Drakemp took a Mamoswine to Madison Regionals, and he completely forgot to put any EVs on it at all, but he ended up taking the regional. So you can, fret about these EV spreads for a long time, but in the end, your play is what really matters.
Right, and so they're important, and that's why we're doing this guide, but they're only as good as you use them. Know what your spread does, because you can come up with this like seemingly amazing EV spread, but your team could just falter because you don't know how to use it. So like I said, the play is very important. The EV spreads just really help enhance that, especially when you make a Pokemon that it can survive this attack. So you can sit there, take the hit, and then like KO the big threat that is to your team for that. So, and that's where the building good EV spreads comes into play. It really enhances your ability to play the game, especially when you just have that knowledge or this is going to work out. And with that should be the close of this guide. I have a link here to Trainer Tower's resource index for VGC 2018. I'll be in the description. Check that out. They've been dishing out a lot of really good content lately, and I'm really happy to see that. So be sure to use that stuff. and just be checking them out, because they'll be posting team reports that just show what spreads people are using, and you can kind of get an idea for certain Pokemon what people tend to do. So, and yeah, that about wraps us up. Bridger, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I got nothing else. Thanks a lot for hosting me on the channel.
Absolutely, and we'll try and get more people, more guests, and I'll try and dish out more guides as we go. This one took a while, but it's done now, so I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, just leave in the comment section below. And yeah, I look forward to doing more of this. So thanks again, Bridger. Appreciate it.
Yep.
And yeah, take care, guys. Have a good one.